Okay. Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. This is our second time that we've come together collectively for our workshop for the work that we're doing around math pathways and Black male achievement. And so I just want to welcome everybody in this space. Today, our topic is going to be talking about bias. Um, and I'm going to talk about it generally, and then we'll be able to bring it down in the classroom. And Trina was just brilliant with the idea that we'll be together for 50 minutes, so we're not going to be pressing up into the hour. And so what I hope to do is for us to have an engaging discussion um, and interactive, so that we can be thinking collectively about the work that we're doing individually, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my slide. And I think we have about 20 participants. So what I'll probably do is some breakout rooms when we kind of get to some discussion points, so they can be a little bit more robust in the sense that we'll have smaller groups together. So I'll go ahead and get started, but welcome. I'm glad to see everybody here. Oh, thanks for the spotlight. Let me share my presentation. Okay, and I'm hoping that this is, all right, sorry, I gotta flip through. Okay, can everybody see the presentation? Thank you, Trina, thank you. So UNC system map pathways for African American collegiate transformation. I know that we've got some new folks that have joined us, and what we're doing in this particular series is that, we talked a little bit about the genesis of the project, which is a beautiful blend of thinking about African American male achievement programs blended with the concepts of co-requisite support that with cultural relevant pedagogical practices embedded within supporting Cal 1 and some statistics courses. And so we do have, I believe, four, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 4 or 5, Michelle, schools across the system?
We have 4 implementation sites, but we have many, many more participants representing schools involved, but 4
Absolutely.
implementation sites and the system office.
Wonderful. So 4 implementation sites in the system office coming together to think deeply about how we're creating these experiences to be able to support, which is a part of an NSF grant that was awarded to the UNC system. And so let's go ahead and get started. So when we talk about equity practices in terms of imperatives, I thought it was really important for me to start with the idea of what are students wanting from professors. When we think about students generally, when we think about what they're looking for when they come into a classroom experience, I think that it's helpful for us to start here, because I think sometimes there's these misnomers, right, or myths that we have about what students think that they want versus what it is that they're asking for. And so this study from Inside Higher Ed, this was released in November of last year. And when they talk about, and this is the student perspective, when students want from professors, it's an introduction to working with people in their field of interest, advice on choosing career and direction, a willingness to listen about personal issues and consider accommodation requests, right? So our students are often seeking support and nurturing from their faculty, and opportunities to be involved in academic research, connections to academic related resources, and then help with choosing a graduate program. And so when we think collectively of how we're building relationships with our students in the classroom, whether we're using advising as that medium in terms of how we're connecting with students, or that mentoring, right, as a medium for how we're connecting with our students. Ultimately, students do want to see support from their faculty. They do want help. They do want direction and guidance. And so I think that this report affirms that. And so when you look a little deeper at this particular survey, they asked students, how would you rate the quality of your current professor's instructions in terms of building relationships with their student? And so when you look at this from a gender breakdown, and so for example, all, then it's good, and then it's fair. I'm sorry that I cut that part out. So the blue is, I'm sorry, the green, the blue is excellent, the green is fair, and then the green, well, the parish green is poor. When you look at it from a breakdown of all, is 22% think that they receive excellent relationship building from their faculty. And when you break it down to male and female, then you start seeing the difference, right? Female students feel like the quality is more excellent at that point. And then, of course, when it comes to being good, 39%, 37%. So when we see males. When we break it down by race, all of course 22%, but then you would see excellent with 24% with white students, 19% Asian, Black or African American, it's 15%, Hispanic, Latino, 22%, and then two or more races, 24%. So when you start thinking about it from a gender perspective, more females feel like the quality is higher in terms of their relationships with faculty. And then when we break it down by race in this particular survey, African American students are the lowest in terms of feeling that they're getting excellent support in terms of relationship building with their faculty. And so I would like to use that as a jumping off point for us to be thinking, what is it about the way that our students are building relationships with us in a classroom? Or what is it about their perception of how they're building relationships with faculty in the classrooms? But in terms of this particular context that we're going to talk about today, I really want us to start with us first in terms of our perspectives and how we are showing up. And so I want to talk a little bit about some self-reflection. So this is our first breakout group. What you see here is a chart that I use with a lot of my classes when we're talking about self-reflection around your identities and how you see yourself and your salient identities in terms of how you are perceived in the world. And so typically I have students fill out the bubbles, right? With your ethnicity, with your socioeconomic status, your gender, your sex, your sexual orientation, national origin, first language. But I really want them to focus on these questions in the middle. Identities that you think about most often that you possess. Identities that you think about least often. And your own identities that you would like to learn more about, identities that have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself, and then identities that have the greatest effect on how others perceive you. I always like, before we start this bias journey in terms of maybe some of the hidden biases that we have, it's how do we see ourselves? Because that plays a lot into the way that we are perceiving others. And so what I will do is I will send some of these questions through the chat, but I'll stop here and get us into some groups. Michelle, are you able to put us into groups?
Yes, let me find the groups.
Yeah, I don't see that option on my.
Derek, can you put us into groups?
I think I may be able to. I'm looking at the settings now.
Do you want to make me host and I'll put us into groups?
Yep, gotcha.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. And so what I will do is I will put those questions in the chat for all of us. Just the two questions. Number one, what identity do you think that guides your perception of yourself? And then what identity do you think guides other people's perceptions of you? Those are the two questions that you're going to focus on, but I will add those into the chat while they are putting us in groups.
How many minutes do you want, Melinda?
Let's do 6 minutes.
I'm going to do 3 people in a group. How about that?
Oh, that's
Is that
perfect.
good? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And you put the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
Okay. Will everybody be able to see those questions?
Yes, they should have access to the chat.
Okay. I can broadcast them too.
Okay.
Can you put them in the chat? Keep putting them in the chat. And then
Yeah, do you see me the first question?
I saw the first one.
Okay. Okay, you've got both of those questions, Michelle?
Yes, ma'am. So just discuss these two questions.
Mm-hmm.
What identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself? What it is? How you are perceived by others. Okay. Well, what identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive myself?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's definitely female,
Mm-hmm.
definitely mother.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, not anymore, but I've always been like the youngest person. Now I'm the oldest.
But not anymore.
Not anymore. I'm not the youngest.
No,
Like,
definitely. Yeah,
my
definitely.
entire higher education career, I have always been the youngest, and now all the boomers are retiring. And so I'm one of the oldest.
Mm,
It's
mm.
interesting to me.
It is, it is. You know, that moment that you go from I'm learning to I'm the elder. Yeah, it's a bit of a transition. Yeah, absolutely. I would say my identities have the strongest effect, of course, African American, then female, and then when I became a mom, yeah,
Really strong.
my lenses of the world were just were very different at that point. But then before I had kids, it was definitely age, like you were saying, Michelle. Like I was usually the youngest person on a leadership team. And so I just became very hyper aware of how people were perceiving my understanding of my work and then how to influence others to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Derek and Terrence.
Thank you for sharing. And sorry I'm late. I think that the strongest thing for myself has always been being an African American, but but I think that it's kind of transformed over time. Like it's become more so like just the way that I carry myself, like the work that I do, and I think that that's become more so my identity. Like the work that I'm doing as an educator has kind of eclipsed that. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's what's
Well, no, I mean, I don't think it's good or bad. I think that it's the way that you're operating, right? It's the lenses in which you're operating from, which definitely the work that we do shapes how we show up. It shapes what we think about. It shapes what we're interested in. So yeah, that's pretty powerful. That's why I think, becoming a mom, I was like, I'm a mom, and I gotta make
Yeah.
sure these kids survive, and I gotta make sure that these kids are educated, and I have to make sure that, and it was one of those moments where you you're just seeing the world differently because you're thinking about impact. So
Well, I think I became more afraid when I became a mom,
mm,
more fearful, I will say.
yeah.
Like,
No,
oh, there could be a tornado, or or we're in the city now. We could be mugged, like that. Whereas I never had those fears before. I definitely remember having that, being a mom and having those things. Probably was a good thing that I developed some caution, but
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, because it's like, how do you control the uncontrollables? So absolutely.
So identities for how, let's see, we have like 60 seconds. What identities have the strongest effect on how you're perceived by others? Female.
Mhm.
I don't know. Y'all have to tell me. That one's hard.
Yeah, I think,
White female.
yeah.
so when we say identity, I'm sorry.
No,
How do we define identity? What do we? Because I think there's
sorry.
like
So there was a chart that I had that
Mhm.
basically looked at race, gender, socioeconomic status. Um, religion, and there were some other things.
See, and I think, okay, I think that's like one of the issues, because all of those things are like, seem to be like defined as identity, but I feel like a moral character is really what that your identity is made up of, right? I think we
Right.
just attach it to like the certain traits, attributes that we can physically see or
Correct.
interpret very easily, but it's really more so like a character.
Yeah.
It's those intrinsic things that you see over time that really
Right.
defines your identity.
Right. No, I love your perspective, because that's what we're trying to get to when we talk about bias, right? You know what I mean? Like the way that we form an opinion based on, like you said, the things that we can see. But
Giving them
often,
60 seconds, okay?
perfect. But often what we find is that biases change based on, as we get to know the, like you said, the inherent intrinsic things that we possess inside, right? And so, for example, if I was in, and I might use this example when we all get back together, I might think that people perceive me based on, Black female, that's my age, my roles and responsibilities that they can see, right? If I'm at the store with my son, something like that. But then what might strike me in terms of how I see myself is if I was to go to Target and my card was declined. And I think, God, people are now looking at me like this Black woman can't afford to shop here. And then I'm like, well, I'm a low, my background is lower middle class and we really didn't have a lot of money. And this person thinks that I'm broke. And you see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like the way that
Yeah.
about perception versus reality. Somebody might just say, my card's been declined before. I've been there. I've experienced that. But I might look at Michelle and be like, you probably never had your card declined. And Michelle was like, you don't know where I've come from, right? In terms of my card being declined or accepted,
Right.
And so I think when we start talking about the dynamic from education, just our perspective and our lenses, the way that we think others are perceiving ourselves sometimes can be projected onto others. So,
Melinda, I think your warmth is like one of the biggest things that the way people perceive you. No, you're just warm. You're like sunshine, even on a bad day.
even on a bad day.
Okay, I'm going to close the rooms. That gives them 60 seconds. Is that cool?
One thing, can we do one thing? So I like how
Sure.
I like how you did that. And so I would like to share something. I feel the same way, the way that you're inviting nature. I like that as well. I perceive that for you from my perspective. And then Michelle, I think your ability to kind of take charge, but also it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like if you take charge in a productive way, like this, I see it is effective. Like I like your leadership. I perceive you as a leader.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm a noisy dog owner. I appreciate that.
Michelle, you're so crazy. No, but you do a wonderful job herding cats without making people feel like they're being chastised. So, and that's a skill. That's definitely a skill. I think that we're almost all back. Well, room 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. Okay, they'll be with us in 13 seconds, whether they're ready or not. This room coffee isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Okay, we're all back. Okay, we're all back. I'm going to go ahead and put up this PowerPoint again so that we can all see those particular identities. Okay, we can all see the screen. So I want to thank you guys for going into your breakouts, talking about our identities in terms of how people are perceiving us and how we perceive others, are always vulnerable conversations. So I want to thank you for the work that you were doing in your rooms. Would anybody like to share out about maybe just 1 or 2 of us just sharing out about what identities have the strongest effect on how you perceive yourself? Any takers?
I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
In doing our activity, one, it was a really was a good conversation, and it really makes you reflect. But when I thought about myself, the identity that I lead with the most is my race, my religion, and my education.
Mhm.
Of course, there's so many other things about me, but I had to think about those top three. And then the whole factor of how other people perceive me is quite similar, but it really makes you wonder really how you're perceived and how you're leading your identity. And so just having that conversation with Mandy and Derek, that was really helpful and insightful. And I really want to do this activity on our campus. But it was I identify as a Black female that's educated, that is that I am very spiritual.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And I can definitely send you these worksheets. I can do that. It's always a very interesting and powerful conversation. Do we have any other thoughts? Anybody else want to share? Okay. Well, one thing that we talked about in our group was, for example, the identities that I have that have the greatest effect on how others perceive you. We were talking a little bit about a lot of these things you can see, and then some of the things you can't see, right? When we think about how our identities show up in terms of perception versus reality. So, for example, I might think the strongest effect on how I perceive myself might be my gender or my race. But let's say, for example, I go to Target and my cards declined. And then the first thing I think about is, oh my God, these people think that I can't afford to shop here, right? And so then my socioeconomic status of how I grew up, middle class, really smacks me in the face, right? And so then that's what I think that you're thinking about me, right? But you don't know that about me. And so when we talk a little bit about relationship building and bias, sometimes it's our projection, right? Is what helps to guide the way that we are perceiving our experiences and then the relationships that we're having. So let's jump into relationship building. I love this exercise, a circle of trust. So if you have something in front of you to be able to write down, because you're going to need to write down the names, just giving you a heads up. So write down 5 to 8. I would recommend probably 5. And if you don't have 5, that's fine. But people that you would say are in your circle of trust. So people that you go to, and they cannot be your family members when you're doing this particular exercise. They can't be your family members. And you'll see why in a moment. So I'm just going to give you maybe a minute to write down a list of 5 to 8 names who people are close to you.
Is this
And that you would consider.
professionally or personally or both?
Oh, it can be both, but people that you
Okay.
definitely feel like you trust. Okay. And once you have those names, the next thing I want you to do is to be able to then put down the following information. By each name, put a check in by the category that you share with the people in your circle that you trust. So for example, are you similar in age? Are you the same race? Do you have the same sexual orientation? Are you at the same socioeconomic status, occupation, nationality? And then do you speak the same native language? Okay. How many of you, based on your list, would say that over 50% of the people in your circle of trust are very much like you? Just use a little icon. Oops. Lord have mercy. I did something to my screen. I can't see everybody. Yeah, let's see, over 50. Okay, there you go. Just put your little thumbs up if over 50% of people on your list are like you. Okay. I know that some people are putting their thumbs up at certain times, but I think that maybe okay. About maybe almost 1/3 of us. Very similar. Okay. Well, what I like about this exercise is that we often say, I have a diverse group of friends. And then when we ask that question of who do you trust? And then how similar are they to you, right? We find that they actually look more like us than when we think that we have a broader sense of our group of friends. So I want to talk a little bit about affinity bias, and this plays into our students, right? So I wanted to use us as an example of how we show up in the world, and then think a little bit more deeply about how our students may be showing up, right? So affinity bias, in-group bias is our tendency to favor our own social group more than a group of that we're not a member of, right? So attraction is influenced by whether we perceive a person as an in-group or an out-group member. So studies show that in general, we extend greater trust, positive regard, cooperation, and empathy to in-group members. And our preference for people like us has important social ramifications. So when we think about our students coming into our classrooms, we think about our students coming to receive advice from advising, if their perception is that we're not in their in group, but we're in their outer group, right? It's going to take a little bit more energy and time for us to be able to build solid, trusting relationships that we would need to be able to help guide them. And I think that this is just an important point to think about, that as we are extending ourselves and building relationships, not just with our colleagues, but with our students, it's important for us to realize that sometimes this affinity bias may be what is preventing them for fully trusting us in the moments in which we think that they definitely need to be trusting us. Any thoughts about that exercise? Was anybody surprised? No. The first time I did it, I was just like, I have a diverse group of, you know what I mean? I'm an academic advisor, I love everybody. And then I thought about, okay, who do you trust? And I was like, oh, okay. There's some things that I'm seeing about myself, right? In terms of why do I extend trust in the way that I do? So when we think about DEIBA work, or diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility, student champions don't take this on. How will we create more equitable outcomes? And so when we think about creating and shaping the culture of the work that we're doing around diversity, equity, especially as we launch into this particular project and the way that we're supporting African-American men in math experiences, ending polite silence, right? The things that we know that we need to address, the way that we need to show up, things that we need to challenge, are things that we need to be doing for the betterment of the student success that we're trying to create. Embedding accountability. And so I think the work that we're doing in these series of workshops, as we think about culturally relevant pedagogical practices, as we think about the co-requisite supports that we're creating, we are going to be building a sense of accountability in that work, right? The try, fail, adjust. We're going to do this work. We're going to see what the impact is, and then we'll make adjustments along the way. And that's very important as we think about how do we build in accountability to the work that we're doing. And then the self-educate for deeper perspective. That's what this whole workshop series is designed to be able to support and do. And then prioritize and take action, which is why I'm so glad to see so many faces in this room today, because that's how this work is going to get done. And some inclusive practices, when we think about how does this work show up on a daily basis, visible commitment, humility, just recognizing that there's things that, we don't know everything. And so we will continue to seek and find out. Being awareness of our bias in terms of how we show up and the perception of ourselves and others and the way that we're working together and supporting. And then cultural intelligence. So there are areas in which we know that we all need to be doing different work in order to continue to build upon our cultural intelligence. And I have 2 more workshop series that we'll do that are going to be able to talk about, stereotyping, looking at the way that what it is that we're perceiving, and how that shows up and how it expresses itself. And then effective collaboration. And so I'm just, again, just really excited to see that a lot of the inclusive practices that are considered to be promising practices are the things that we are currently engaging with through this workshop series as we continue to do this critical and important work for the UNC system. And so I know that, well, that's the end of my slideshow, but I want to bring us all back together. If there's any thoughts in terms of maybe one thing that you might do differently or think about differently as a result of some of our conversations today. I love everybody's face. They're like, no, this is perfect. I'm completely transformed and healed by the spirit, and things are going to move forward.
I have a
Well,
question.
sure.
So Melinda, is this exercise something that you recommend we do in our co-requisite groups?
Oh yeah, I would. Because, for example, I just think that even the students understanding how they see themselves and then their perceptions of how they think others see them, I think is very powerful in the educational experience.
And so we will need to develop a place to put the materials for this exercise. And I guess that might go in the designer's notebook or someplace else. I guess we, as a leadership team, will figure that out, where to put those things. Do you recommend doing this type of activity at the beginning of a class? I mean, I was more comfortable sharing because I knew the people I was sharing with, but I'd like to hear from other people who shared with strangers how that made you feel, and if and where you think this might go within your class, like at the beginning of the semester, the middle of the semester, what's optimal?
I can speak up. So the activity on the trust, the circle of trust, I would feel very uncomfortable if I had to share that with people I didn't know. The other activity in terms of identity, I think I would feel more comfortable sharing with others. Even if I didn't know them.
So maybe like in the beginning of the class, doing that first exercise, and then maybe towards the end of the class doing the circle of trust as students and faculty get to know each other a little bit more, or just one exercise.
So I really like the idea of doing that, the first, like what your identity, but it also including your mathematical identity. So tying those things in together. But I totally agree with Don about the circle of trust. Might be later in the semester for me.
Yeah.
Are there any students on the call? Are there any students here now that can speak up? Derek, the closest we have.
He said Derek.
He's not a student, but he's close.
I think we have a student curriculum.
Yes, I'm a student.
Oh, you want to take it?
You can go ahead and take it.
Putting you on the spot.
I was going to give my opinion on the identity one. As a student, maybe adding that at the beginning of a class can help those with a more background approach to math, to sit in the background and don't really speak in class. It can help them sort of come out of their shell a little bit, that's familiar around a little bit more. That's just what
Okay, I think I got some of that, Jonathan, but you broke up a little bit.
I wouldn't mind giving a little bit of insight.
Okay.
I think that students could, I know I've always worked best in courses where I felt like more of a sense of community were being built, where you walk into the class, it's not so much of, okay, just have your seat and listen to the lecture and then you can leave. I think like when you can build a sense of community where you have more of a connection with your professor or teacher, and you can look around you and you can have casual conversations and you get to know this other students in the course with you. I think it can build more comfort and allow students to learn easier. So I do like the idea of having an exercise like that or something similar. I can understand how some students may not feel comfortable sharing that much information. So maybe not the first day you ask for something like that, but as you build that community throughout the semester, you could ask in mid-semester or, mid-course, how everyone's feeling, and then run an exercise like that. That would just be my opinion. Just to warm people up more, have them feel a lot more comfortable instead of the first day you try to establish that right away. That's just what I think, more mid semester, mid course. Try to get them a little more comfortable with being around everyone else, especially on the first day. No one likes really talking on the first day of anything. So I think just warming students up would probably be more beneficial for them and have more contribution within the course.
Okay. No, thank you for that.
When I was thinking about the circle of trust exercise, I was thinking about how, for me, a key takeaway is that if we don't think about it, the people we trust most are the people that are most like us. And I'm wondering if it's sort of building off of what Deshaun was talking about that building the sense of community, if tweaking the exercise to let people individually reflect on it, and then having a discussion about how we want this class to be a place where we trust each other. And so if you look around the room and people don't fit the description of the people that you traditionally trust, what can we do to be trustworthy, And I don't know if a tweaking like that is consistent with the sort of goals of it.
No, I think that I like that framing because, for example, if people aren't comfortable in disclosing, then what you're doing is then you're having them say, okay, what is it you're learning about yourself and how we're showing up in this class and how we're building trust for each other. And then when you talk about what are the markers for establishing trust, you're going to hear things like communication, feedback, I want to know that people really care about the fact that I'm going to be successful in this course. And so then you can build off of those things. And then that's how you're contributing to your community. So I think you definitely could reframe how the follow-up discussions are going to be from that particular exercise. So I really like that idea. And then with the identities, your math identity too, I think that is good way to pull that into that concept of your identities. Stacy, I think you were going to have a comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Trina to wrap us up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I have done identity work in my mathematics classroom at the beginning of the semester. Now hearing from the students, maybe I shouldn't have done it at the very beginning, but it was more focused on their mathematical identity, how they perceive themselves, and then how they thought others wanted to others perceive them. And it really was enlightening because it generated a lot more conversation than what I thought. So it took one or two students getting up, sharing, and then the conversation went. So I have done that work at the beginning of the semester, and I have found it to be very useful for building community in class. They have an awareness of who's beside them, what their feelings and stuff are towards mathematics and how they identify. So it's really been helpful.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Is that something you can share, Stacy? Do you have that written up anywhere?
Yeah, I do actually. I can share that.
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, for those who were here earlier, I'm coming to you live from California. And so I was just like, we're going to talk today because we need to engage around this important work. And so thank you guys for your contributions to the conversations today. And so I think that we've got some good strategies moving forward about how to incorporate that work into our courses moving forward. And so I will, Trina, I know that you wanted to share some things with the group before we wrapped up today.
Yes, thank you, Melinda. I just wanted to share the designer notebook that we have created and that we'll be sharing with you guys. So before we share them with you, I want to at least explain about them. So hopefully you're seeing my screen. So what we've done is we've created a Google folder for each of the people we think are creating a co-requisite class. So we can create it for whoever else needs one. We'll figure that out with Michelle, I guess. So you will see all of these, and then this is what you'll be working in. Let me try to pull up. So here's one of those documents. This is the designer notebook. The other 3 documents are in this one. And we just wanted to have a place for you guys to reflect on what we do and kind of keep everything in one spot. And also we wanted to be able to look at some of the things you say. So we wanted to be able to look into your designer notebooks to help us figure out, to inform us what we maybe should, to guide our next day, I guess. So the first part is just giving a little information about you, about the designer, about your target course. So if you're doing a co-requisite for Calc 1, you'd put information about the target course would be the Calc 1. And then at the bottom, there's the day-to-day or the weekly schedule. So today was February 1st, or is February 1st, and Melinda did the implicit, well, I guess I don't know that I would call it that anymore. Maybe affinity biases. So we have a place here if you want to write some takeaways, maybe some takeaways on how it might affect your teaching. You can put that into your document. Again, everyone will have their own. And then what Katie, Tracy, and I would like you to do before next week is to first think about your syllabus and think about how does your syllabus promote a sense of belonging and how does your syllabus normalize struggle, and then read this article, and we'll start next week with talking about that. So again, I'll be sharing today, each of you your own folder. So if you don't hear from me, again, I'll get with Michelle and make sure I have folders for everyone. And maybe I'll put my email in. Actually, Tracy, can you put my email in the chat so that people can have it if they don't hear from me today? I'm gonna stop sharing. Other questions for me about that? Again, this is more for you guys to have a place to organize the stuff for this semester.
Hey, Trina, for those in my group at NCCU who are not able to attend the meetings, do you want me to share that with them and get them to fill it also?
So I can make that. I mean, if you give me their name, I can make their own folder with their stuff if they want that. I mean, if you guys are working together, if you want one folder, then yeah, share it with each other. But I'm happy to make one for everyone who's making one if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Let's make one for everyone. We are going to try to find a second time for 2 or 3 people that were unable to make this meeting.
Okay.
And
Right.
Trina, I do have a link to an implicit bias test and an article that talks about that same work. So I think I was thinking about Michelle's comment about how do we add things to the designer notebook based off of the conversations that we're having. So is it okay if I just kind of share those things with you and then we?
Yes, so you can share it with me, and then when I send the email out today, I'll put those links in the email and they can put it in their designer notebook if that's what they want.
Sure, if they want to capitalize on that. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other thoughts for the collective group? I know that we want to honor time, and I know that some people had to take off and head to some other meetings, but any other thoughts for the good of the order?
This was a great second session. Thanks to everybody who is putting so much work in on this. Really appreciate all of you.
Well, thank you so much. I want you guys to have it. I'm sorry, Tony, were you going to say something?
Oh, I'll say thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing us when we come back together again, and we'll be in touch. Let us know if there's anything or any questions that you have. All right.
Have a great week, everybody.
All right. Have a great week.
You have a great week.